I'm Tony Sherba. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at Yeti. Love digging into new technologies and learning about new things. So I want to share with you something I'm specifically excited about and I think has a lot of opportunity. So the subject of today is really going to be like Ethereum, but basically all the stuff that you can build off of Ethereum as well, and kind of some of the implications and opportunities that are there. I'm going to start with a little bit of history and describe some of the basics. It's going to get a little bit, technical, but I'm going to keep it fairly high level as well. So to start off, everybody's heard of crypto and blockchains and crypto investing. This is not necessarily going to be a talk about crypto investing. There is obviously like a major roller coaster that happens there. As you've seen, like, things will go up and skyrocket. Ethereum specifically has skyrocketed up to $4,000 a Ether. And then back down to 2000. Before that, it was, a couple $100. And there's been different spikes and stuff like that that have happened over the years. This is going to be a talk that's more specifically about Ethereum and like what we can do as technologists and developers around it. So I'm going to first talk just a little bit about blockchain basics. I think a lot of people, on this call actually know about this, but I'm not sure, some people might not. So blockchain is like the fundamental technology that's pretty exciting here. Bitcoin was the pioneer of this and was created in 2009. Everybody's heard it's decentralized, distributed ledgers. I'm going to talk a little bit about how that actually works, specifically with Bitcoin, and then I'll get into Ethereum. So essentially there's transactions and how you secure those transactions. We've all probably heard at this point that there is quite a bit of energy usage with Bitcoin. And that is because of proof of work, which is how it actually builds the blocks for the blockchain. So I'm going to jump into this diagram. And so starting at the top, there is how transactions happen and how the blockchain is built. Is somebody will start a transaction, and then they'll put it into, they'll send it up to a node, like a Ethereum or a Bitcoin node, and then that transaction will get sent into a pool. From the pool, their miners will actually pick transactions from the pool based on how much the transaction essentially is saying they will pay for the miner to process and validate the transaction. So the miners obviously will pick the ones that are offering the most money, or the most, like, in Ethereum parlance, gas, to actually process the transaction. When they pick it up, they'll take the transaction and then they will validate it and put it into blocks. And so that's what the blockchain actually is. And so you can think of it as like there's one, like, this is an older version of the ledger, and this is the newer version of the ledger that's coming in as miners process this. Miners can get money from the actual processing of from the actual transactions. They'll get those from users. It's like a fee in order to process the transaction. And then they'll also get money, like they'll also get Bitcoin or Ethereum based on, based on how much work they're doing. So it's proof of work. So they have to constantly be processing all of these like really like crazy math problems, basically, to get new Ethereum or new Bitcoin from the system. So that's blockchain, and that's been like out there for over a decade now. And so Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin, he's a Canadian. He's actually 27 years old, so younger than me. And so he was really excited about Bitcoin and what was happening there, and blockchain technology, but was like, hey, this would be really cool if there was actually some like a scripting language that was that was a part of the blockchain. That is, and so that was the kind of impetus for Ethereum. He started it in 2015. It actually launched in 2013. He actually launched it in 2015. So the major difference here is that there's smart contracts built into the Ethereum system, like the Ethereum protocol. And so those are built in a language called Solidity, which is very similar to JavaScript. I'll show a little bit of Solidity later in this presentation. And when he created it, he basically copied the same kind of principles of Bitcoin, which was to use proof of work, which is have these miners processing like transactions and have them doing a lot of using a lot of energy to create that. Ethereum uses graphics processors mostly, and Bitcoin uses CPUs. So Ethereum is now very stably the number 2 cryptocurrency by market cap. So I think I checked this morning, Bitcoin is at 600 billion plus in market cap. It's gone higher than $1 trillion before. And Ethereum is like $230 billion in market cap. And, that's been up to like $500 million before, or $500 billion before. So getting into a little bit of the details on how Ethereum works, and some more broadly around Bitcoin and stuff, is there's nodes. So somebody actually will have a server and have have an Ethereum client, or I might not be using the exact right terminology, but have a node on their server that actually has the entire blockchain on it. Those nodes all communicate in a decentralized peer-to-peer fashion. There is wallets, and I should have put wallet/accounts here. So a wallet is a part of an account, but an account can access can access and communicate with nodes. And so you can download a client, an Ethereum client on your computer, and access this network. So the validators are traditionally miners. I'm going to get into where things are getting pretty interesting with the Ethereum network right now. But people who validate computers who validate transactions. There's obviously gas fees, which I described before, which is how much you pay for a transaction to process on the Ethereum network. And that goes to the validators, miners in current times. The thing that's really interesting is there's also a virtual machine that is kind of built into the network as well, which allows for running the smart contracts that I talked about before. So you can actually upload, what you do in order to have a smart contract is you write a script in Solidity, and then you upload it to Ethereum so that it can run in this virtual machine, and you pay a gas fee for it. When you upload your smart contract into the Ethereum network, it actually becomes a part of the network. So it's a permanent thing that you upload. So obviously, we're uploading code here, you need to make sure it's very tested before you commit that to the mainnet and push it up. But obviously, it costs money to do that too. So what happens is, I had another slide. sorry, I'm jumping around. So what happens is actually your smart contract goes to everybody that's running a node. And so when you have a transaction, miners will all execute nodes, and whoever there will be like one result that will get pushed back to the network. So smart contracts are deployed just like transactions through the network and applied to the blockchain. Again, there's a lot of details here. I'm probably glossing over a pretty good amount of it, but just as a way to understand it. So I'm going to jump into now Web3. So there's basically like Web 1 was like websites. Web 2 is kind of building like asynchronous websites. And now what a lot of people are talking about is like Web 3. And so Web 3 is decentralized web development. So and a quote here is a decentralized and fair internet where users control their own data, identity, and destiny. What's the feeling overall in kind of the blockchain, like crypto world, is that the internet has become very centralized. Like everything's hosted on Amazon or like a handful of other places. All of our accounts are, essentially like, up on Facebook or Google, and they're kind of abusing users in the sense of they're just sucking their data and they're using you as the product to feed you ads and whatever. And so the idea is that Web3 fixes some of that. It actually gives people control of it because it runs on a network that's decentralized. There's overwhelmingly things that are in web, like that are built in, what's Web3 are built on Ethereum. Like almost everything is. I think it's like something like 96% of like DeFi apps and Web3 apps are built using Ethereum. As I mentioned, like Solidity is the scripting language that is basically the back end of it. So you would write something in Solidity as a smart contract, deploy it to like compile it, deploy it to the main net and the Ethereum network, and that would be your back end. And so dApps are decentralized applications. And so a dApp is something that has a front end interface and then essentially a back end smart contract as its back end. So there's a JavaScript library called Web3.js that enables interactivity between the like Ethereum network and front end, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. There's one of the issues is also being able to, a major thing is that your account and your wallet is your identity, and essentially your kind of your user profile in Web3, and so that's hard to integrate with a browser. There are now plugins that you can download for Chrome or Firefox or whatever, that essentially incorporates your wallet or identity into your browser. And so Web3 can also access some of those as well. And so MetaMask is kind of like one of the most popular ones of that. When creating dApps, like I said, smart contract deployment is permanent. And so you can do different things to like update it, but it's a pretty big deal to actually push something out. And so there is a test net that you can use before you do that. And so there's people run testnet nodes and things like that also. So super simple, just to kind of show like what these, what the code for this looks like is like, this is like a, basically like the hello world example of Solidity. And then this is an example of Web3.js. So you can call things, you get balances from like, somebody's you know, somebody's wallet and things like that. There's probably a whole bunch to learn that can be done about like basics of you know, Web3 dApp development that I'm kind of just brushing the surface of right now. So I think I mentioned like I've covered dApps a lot. One of the premises of this is like code is law. Is kind of like a term that's used often. And that's, you know, really because you're building contracts essentially. One of the major things about this whole movement is that everything should be decentralized. Obviously, if you're building a front end and hosting it on Amazon, that's kind of like oh, hey, you're using a centralized source for it. So there are actually other like, you know, IPFS that is a decentralized like front end server platform as well. So there's a whole like movement to decentralize everything. I'm going to get into some of the problems and issues with that later too. So one of the reasons that Ethereum has kind of like taken off over some of the other, like over Bitcoin as an example, is that you can build a lot on top of it. Obviously, it has a scripting language. You can build, you can write code on it, and that's just for. I feel like we're going to post this on YouTube. I'm going to get a ton of people who shoot holes in everything I'm saying. There is the ability to do some sort of like smart contracts in Bitcoin. I believe, I'm not 100% certain of that, but they're overwhelmingly people are using Ethereum for this stuff. So anyway, some of the cool things that you can do with Ethereum is you can create decentralized autonomous organizations. So you can write smart contracts that essentially kind of hold the rules for how an organization works. There's, you know, you can create tokens that are essentially kind of like shares, like voting shares, and you can have people, you know, pay with tokens, submit tokens. If you have tokens, you can vote, you can do all sorts of things using this token system and like token and smart contract system. So there's a lot of really interesting things going on. There's like, you know, essentially kind of like VCs that are built on DAOs. I can see a ton of like nonprofits being able to be built on like nonprofit organizations, like community organizations being built on DAOs. There already are a bunch out there. In a more simple fashion, one of the things that came to mind as I was thinking about DAOs was like back in the day when we had an office and before we had an office manager, we had this thing called Chore Lord, which was essentially like one person was in charge of like making sure people did their chores every month, like every month or week or whatever. And then they got like a bonus to like be able to like, you know, throw a party or something if everybody did their chores. And so it could be like, I think there's a ton of room to just experiment with this protocol and do a lot of different things. And a lot of people are doing that right now. So that's, you know, super interesting. To jump into like ERC20. And so Ethereum is open source and it's constantly being improved upon. And so like these ERC things are just like, you know, essentially somebody wrote this, submitted it to the open source repo, it got tested, approved, etc. And so there's the ability to build tokens into Ethereum. So a lot of other cryptocurrencies that you hear about are actually just Ethereum tokens. You can build tokens and be able to run a heck of a lot of things off of it. In 2017, there was this whole big thing about like initial coin offerings, and that was like literally because this was actually built into Ethereum and people were able just to create tokens like and sell them. And so it was yeah, it's pretty crazy and pretty cool to just think about you know, things you can do with that. One of the things I know we've had like a bunch of people hitting us up about like building things in NFTs is NFTs are built on Ethereum too. there's fungible tokens, which is like, you know, being able to create tokens. All tokens are like essentially the same. There's no difference in between tokens. But with non-fungible tokens, there can only be one of this token ever made. And so, you know, that is being assigned to art and being assigned to different things like that, which people are selling. This Nyan cat meme or GIF or whatever, that was super popular. This sold for like millions of dollars because someone was like, this is like the authentic like ownership token that they were able to make in NFTs, and a ton of that stuff has been going on. One of a guy we used to work with who did like a bunch of cool illustrations and stuff with us a while ago, I like literally just saw on Twitter like this morning, he just sold like 8 ETH, so like, or 4 ETH of like, you know, his artwork on you know, on an app. And so that's like 8 grand he made, you know, by, you know, a patron essentially. Another thing that's really interesting in terms of smart contracts is actually connecting smart contracts to the real world. And so there's this concept of oracles, which essentially are smart contracts or programs that are looking at various data sources throughout the world, and then making determinations via code, like coming to a consensus, making determinations via code, and then applying that to smart contracts. So like, let's say, you know, you want to make a smart contract that's like, if it hits 100 degrees today, like, you know, we're going to release this NFT that said, congratulations, you survived 100 degrees, whatever. It's a stupid example, but you could actually program a smart contract to look at the weather channel and a few other things via oracles, and determine like what was the temperature that day, and that could be applied to your smart contract. You know, you can apply this to market data, event data, like payments, things like that as well. And so there's a company called Chainlink, which is specifically just like creating oracles right now. I talked about this, slide was in the wrong place. So there's another big buzz, it's not a buzzword, it's a buzz acronym mashup, I guess, which is DeFi right now, and which stands for decentralized finance. Decentralized finance is a really interesting development with all of this. It's essentially dApps, so decentralized applications that specifically focus on finance. And there is a ton of like really interesting things that are going on right now with this. There's the MakerDAO, which has created essentially like DAI, which is a Ethereum token that is pegged to the US dollar. So you can put your, like, let's say, you know, I've got 5 Ethereum, I could put 5 Ethereum up and then get like DAI, like DAI, and I can do stuff with that like in a more stable fashion. So you can kind of like make loans and things like that on like, you know, on the Ethereum platform without a bank. Anyone can access it. Anybody can put up collateral. Anybody can get involved. And so that's also what like Uniswap, Aave, and Compound are as well, is that they're doing these you know, lending platforms, which are pretty crazy right now. It's like, if I wanted to put up money, I could essentially lend to somebody else via a smart contract that I've never met before, and they could, you know, and I could get a percentage back based on it. Now, you know, the how that happens is like, you know, I don't necessarily even need to know this person. It's a trustless system. That person puts up collateral, and that via some sort of a you know, other token or you know, cryptocurrency, and I can lend to them, and if they don't pay me back, then I get their collateral, right? So it's just like there's a ton of this like crazy stuff happening. OpenSea and Rarible are NFT marketplaces, so where you can, like, people can bid on artwork and things like that. There's there's also the ability to do like games. Like there's betting markets and all sorts of stuff that's actually built into like that people have built on top of Ethereum as well. Specifically, Decentraland and crypto voxels actually have like digital real estate that they're selling, and people are buying and creating virtual houses and stuff like that, and like places to store their NFT artwork. So it's, you know, it's kind of crazy. It's obviously this is all like unregulated right now. It's global. It's like, you know, anybody can put stuff on there. So there's a ton of schemes. Like if you search like DeFi, there's just as many people who are like, you know, hey, I lended something out and it was super successful for me. And just as many people who are like, yeah, the smart contract was bullshit and just like, you know, funneled money to somebody else, and I lost a bunch of like, you know, somebody just like stole all my Ethereum. So it's like, it's very unregulated right now. It's really important if you're getting involved in this stuff to like actually do like your research, and just like if someone promises you 17% interest, chances are it's bullshit, you know? But it's exciting because there's a lot of like, you know, innovation happening, but it's the Wild West really. So to jump back into like Ethereum, there's some big issues with Ethereum right now. Proof of work is very carbon intensive. There's like, this is an Ethereum rig that I found a picture of. Like these are a bunch of GPUs just burning like energy right now. You know, you've heard like, you know, Bitcoin is using like what a small country uses in terms of like electricity. And there's a bunch of theory around like, you know, oh, it's, you know, good because it uses excess, etc. But like the bottom line is like it uses a lot of electricity. And with that, like, so anyway, that's a problem. The other thing is that like the network isn't necessarily scaling all that well. Like with like what happens, it's really expensive. It cost me over $100, and that was before things like went up, to like mint an NFT. I made a, you know, snowboard video NFT. I think I shared it with some people here, just as an experiment. And then to just make a transfer, it's like $20 to $30. Again, you're competing against other people trying to make transactions when you do these things. That, you know, and that's all just because of network congestion. So what's happening right now is Ethereum, like, you know, and Vitalik Buterin, which I mentioned, is kind of, he's like, I've heard him called like a philosopher king of Ethereum. They've been like, and it's a whole open source community with tons of people all over the world, have been working through like, you know, how do we make this better? And make this more scalable to achieve some of the goals that we want, which is like a, you know, decentralized computing platform. So there's a whole like, you know, 5-year roadmap for Ethereum 2 and improvements to the system. It's starting to roll out right now. They've got these cool images that you know, are associated with the different phases of this. But basically like what's happened is like they've actually created another version of Ethereum, which is called the Beacon chain, which is the first part of Ethereum 2. That Ethereum 2 actually no longer uses proof of work. It uses what's called proof of stake. So proof of stake, instead of having miners do a bunch of computation and things, actually allows people that have Ethereum to put it on a node and be able to say, I'm staking this Ethereum, and I will use this as the tool to validate the network. And so you have a bunch of people that are staking Ethereum, and you have and so instead of sending those transactions to the miners, they're sending the transactions to people who have stake in the network. And so those nodes that are running that have staked Ethereum in them are actually validating the network. Now, what the benefit of that is that there's like a lottery system that if you're staking and putting up your Ethereum, you can earn interest on your Ethereum, because after, so many transactions, it actually gives you some Ethereum as like a, hey, thank you for processing transactions on the network. And there's also like gas fees that are used. There's some things that are happening where how the gas fees are processed. I won't get into that right now. But what that's going to do is that's going to reduce the gas fees that people have to pay. And so the transactions are going to go down. As more Ethereum gets staked and there's more nodes on the network, they're going to, there's going to be more of them there. So the network will be less congested. It's also going to make it much, much more green. It costs way less to like just say I have stake in this network than to just be running computational resources on it. There's a ton of theory around this, but it's also a little bit more secure. There's a protocol built in that if you are doing something, if you are pushing transactions that are not that are incorrect and not like the consensus doesn't agree on it. And I put a little bit about the consensus on here, is that there's if you're proven to basically be like, pushing faulty transactions, the Ethereum that you staked can get slashed. It's basically like they'll take half of the Ethereum that you stake. So there's incentive to not be doing that. So anyway, that's kind of like the beacon chain. Then what's going to happen over the next couple months and in early 2022 is the current Ethereum system, Ethereum 1, is going to get like, the visualization here is docked into the Ethereum 2, and that will become the main net basically. After that, they're going to start sharding the network. I'm not 100% sure how that all is going to happen, but essentially that's going to help speed things up quite a bit. So what I'm excited about, I definitely feel like the internet has gotten overly centralized. Like, I feel like, when I first fell in love with the internet back in the day, like it was the Wild West. And like, granted, there's downsides to all that. But it does, like, we're all in Facebook and Google's world scrolling through feeds. And like, I feel like, infusing some new life into it is going to be really exciting. Identity and payments were actually always meant to be a part of the internet. The HTTP protocol 402 is like payment not accepted. There was never a good way to actually do this though, because you had to have credit card processing and stuff like that. And so I do think that this is like almost like a full realization of the internet, and this is an open source protocol too. So it's like, it's cool that it's not like a company that owns it. I think with gas fees being lowered, there's going to be like a tremendous amount of things that are possible, micro payments, tipping, things like that. Easy, fast transactions. Like, we're talking borderless. Like, there's no, like, we don't have to, in order for us to work with somebody or whoever, like, we've got to send money to whatever, it has to transfer, all that stuff. Like, all that stuff is going to like kind of fade away, which is really exciting and really interesting. I also think in terms of like DAOs and games and stuff like that, like, being able to process transactions at very low cost is going to be really interesting. I think, because every time you basically do something on a DAO right now, it's like $20-$30 to like process that transaction, so I think that there's going to be really interesting ways for people to like crowdsource things and pool money, make decisions without like really knowing somebody. You can do a lot of things where, you have an organization of like-minded people around the world. You don't need to know people. You don't need to like, really get into it, and you can still trust them because of like the protocols that are there. So it feels like another open source layer that on top of the internet, which I think is going to be like really exciting. And then banks suck. I mean, like, you know, they get super low interest rates from the government and then charge you like high interest rates for loans and things like that. And like, I think actually just going direct to people for, you know, for finance and like being able to remove a lot of the middleman and like the bullshit is going to be really exciting. This is probably the most controversial slide I'm going to show. There's, you know, there's basically like Bitcoin versus Ethereum. There's Bitcoin maxis, which are, you know, people who are like Bitcoin only, it's going to happen. That's just like a terminology is like a maxi is someone who like is only Bitcoin, totally blind to anything else. I don't think that that's like, I think that Bitcoin is kind of suffering right now from like being just like big. And essentially it's designed to work like gold, which is a storage of wealth, but there's not a heck of a lot that you can do with it. And it's not super flexible. Like I mentioned that like some Ethereum transactions are slow, like Bitcoin transactions are super slow. Like I've transferred cryptocurrency between different wallets and like Bitcoin can take hours. Whereas like some of these other cryptocurrencies can like, you know, take seconds. So it's really like interesting. And so, you know, again, people will be like, oh, there's the Lightning Network, which is like another layer that's like on top of Bitcoin, but it's not actually affecting the Bitcoin blockchain. And I don't know too much about that stuff, so I'm not going to get too into it, but I just like, I feel like being able to actually build stuff on top of it adds this other layer to money, which is incredibly interesting. What I keep thinking about as I think about like Bitcoin versus Ethereum is I keep thinking of like the gold, like gold and the gold standard versus oil and like the you know, the petrodollar. So everything used to be based on like the gold standard and like dollars were backed by gold. What happened in like the 70s is like we went off of the gold standard, and like what happened to the US dollar was everybody agreed that oil was going to be paid for in US dollars. And that made US dollars the like fundamental, like, you know, reserve currency of the world, which has helped the US dollar quite a bit more than being on the gold standard. And so when I look at this and it's like, there's, you know, Bitcoin is emulating gold, and everyone's like, oh, you know, Bitcoin's going to replace gold. What's probably like more valuable is actually the thing that people transact with that makes the world run. Like, and that's, you know, and that is more Ethereum than Bitcoin. So anyway, that's like just some theory and speculation, complete speculation. But the one term that I found interesting is the flippening. So it's like when this is what everybody who's an Ethereum fan, which I guess I am now, you know, especially giving this talk, is when the market capitalization and like the transactions and all of that stuff from Ethereum eclipses Bitcoin. And so that's like the flippening. And that is, I think it'll happen eventually. There's already some things that are, you know, like people, you know, there's more like, I don't want to say more transactions, but there's more happening on Ethereum. I don't know the exact you know, metrics, but there's more happening on Ethereum than there is on Bitcoin really right now. So opportunities, I think there's, you know, just decentralizing things in general, giving people control of their identity, creating like decentralized applications are going to be really valuable. I am personally really excited about the idea of DAOs. I think that there's a lot of power in community organization around the world with very little friction. I'm thinking like, you know, I mentioned some ideas around it, but I think that there's like, you know, even just like fan clubs and you know, community organizations, you know, even like open source networks and stuff like that. There's some very interesting DAOs that are like getting grants to people to build things on Ethereum. And so that's really interesting. I mentioned like capital pools, being able to, you know, find people and like, you know, get money and invest in things and stuff like that is exciting. And then, you know, micropayments, I mentioned some of those ideas earlier. And then a major thing is like in the United States, we have pretty good access to financial tools and things like that. but like around the world, like people, you know, people's currencies are doing crazy things. People, you know, like there's a heck of a lot of just like, you know, difficulty for people to get access to finance. And granted, this requires access to the internet and it requires computational resources, but you know, as those things get cheaper and cheaper, it's going to become a lot more accessible for a lot more people to get involved in, like, you know, in all of these things, like DAOs, like finance, you know, all sorts of things, get loans, stuff like that. You know, I could give, like, you know, in theory, I could give a loan to somebody, you know, in Indonesia or something like that, you know, like a farmer or whatever. And that would be like so hard to do right now, you know, in the current structures that we have. But I do see, like, so in like crypto world, they use the term normies for people who like just don't understand this stuff. I think the biggest opportunity is being able to create user interfaces that allow accessing all this stuff. Like, it is right now just like so confusing and so convoluted to do this stuff. I think building dApps that allow people to get access to this and be able to get involved and you know, do different things is going to be awesome. And I think that even the biggest things, people aren't even going to know that it's built on Ethereum or built on blockchain, but they're going to see the value, you know. So with that, thanks for listening. This is like a little, Ethereum's got a lot of cool little imagery and things like that too. It's a little rhino for ETH2. So with that, I'll you know, leave it open to questions. Thanks.